Welcome. I guess we'll go ahead and get things kicked off here. It's great to be able to welcome Councilmember Stevens and Eric to our briefing this afternoon. I appreciate you guys making the time to meet with us. I did want to turn it over just briefly to Commissioner Trask, maybe say a few words since she is our representative on WSAC and the Ledge Steering Committee, and then hand back over to Jamie and Eric.
Good afternoon. It's good to see you guys. Hopefully we'll be seeing each other in person soon. Just wanted to give a little bit of history of WSAC. You guys have been around since 1906, so a little longer than any of us in this room, I hope. And Jamie was, or Councilmember Stevens was elected to be our president at our last meeting. I think that was in November, correct?
Correct.
Yep. So I'm on the Legislative Steering Committee, Federal Issues and Relations Committee, Timber Counties, Coastal Counties, and NACO. Who was it that finally convinced us to join NACO? I wanted to thank them because they had been an excellent resource for us during the CARES funding, or the ARPA funding, and so many other things. So really glad that you guys finally convinced us to join, and appreciate that a lot. WSAC is also very involved in so much that goes on at the county level. And well, obviously, because you represent the counties, the counties would struggle if we didn't have you guys. So wanted to thank you guys so much for being around. And on that note, I'll just turn it over to WSAC.
Great. Well, receiving. I'll start sharing the screen here as well.
Thank you very much for taking the time to have us meet with you. We'll try to get to as many courthouses as we can as a president and fill you in on what's going on in WSAC. The three of you, at least that I've known you, have been around long enough to know that WSAC has made a big transition in the last couple of years, mainly due to the pandemic, but much of it is carrying on, becoming a key information source for all of us. I also want to thank your county commissioners for leaning in and joining and being willing to serve on the statewide boards and commissions. It's so important. We fight to get ourselves onto those boards and commissions, so it's very worthwhile when somebody's willing to go ahead and be willing to serve on those, and it's important to the entire organization. And that's mainly what I was going to start with, and turn it back over to Eric to run through this.
This is where I need you to tell you keep stalling while I find the correct screen share. As you can see there, that's not it.
But Commissioner Schutte, aren't you you're on one of the boards and commissions, correct?
I was previously on LSAC or LSC, and then Commissioner Trask, I think, took that position. I think I serve, I was appointed to the Transmission Corridors Work Group on behalf of the counties, as well as recently to the Ecosystem Coordination Board of the Puget Sound Partnership.
Oh, great. And thank you for doing that. When I first joined the Ecosystem Coordination Board, there were very few elected commissioners or council members on that board, and the lack of knowledge of land use and the environment and the restrictions we're under were very, very apparent. But now that we have more commissioners represented on that board, some of the things can be a little more realistic and help educate a lot of the other members on what our constraints are when it comes to land use, particularly around the shorelines.
Yeah, I think that's a sentiment shared by our county colleagues on the ECB. I know I just spoke with council members Young and Mello from Pierce County about the work on the ECB, and they said that they basically said exactly what you did. So I think a great opportunity for our voices to be heard.
Great.
Well, thanks for stalling while I found the briefing document. I think this was transmitted to you electronically as well, so hopefully you were able to get a copy of that. I really appreciate it. Nice to see you, Mark Neary. I didn't get a chance to start poking fun at you before you started the meeting, but so I would just, it's nice to see you back in the county family and at Mason County. So thanks, welcome back to Mason County. We appreciated working with you when you were at Thurston, and certainly for your service at Secretary of State's office for all those years. So it's nice to see you back in working directly for a county, not just serving this as well in your role at the Secretary of State's office. So
thanks. Yeah, good to be back. Good to be back to the local side. And anytime you want to make fun of Judge Cobb, then, you know, as long as it's not me, I'm good with it.
I could make a living making fun of Judge Cobb, but I won't today anyway. So the courthouse briefing document is really meant to really help guide us in our discussion and keep us on track as we kind of move through. And thanks for the chance to do that. We, as you heard from Councilmember Stevens, we really try and work, and it's been a while since we've been to Mason, but I can recall being there. We got kind of waylaid by the pandemic. We were able to start getting out last year. We did some courthouse briefings virtually as well as some in person last summer, and we're starting to make our effort to get back out there as well. Just to remind you a little bit about who we are, we do directly serve the 39 counties, and our primary client is the 39 counties, the county commissioners, county council members, and the 4 county executives. Those 139 elected officials are our primary client and who we work directly for. They set the policy direction for the organization. We also serve what we call our affiliate groups, and those are affiliate groups that are directly beneath the boards of county commissioners and county council members, depending on their situation, or the county executives, county managers, depending on your situation. But it's the affiliate groups for public health, for the engineers, for our administrators section, solid waste managers, human services, IT, planning, clerks of the boards, councils. So there's a number of groups that we work closely with. We have historically, for the past half a dozen years, although we no longer provide them direct service, we were providing contract services to both the County Auditors Association as well as for the City County Information Services Directors. But those are 2 groups that we also have historically worked closely with. All 39 counties are members. And then we work closely with WACO, the Washington Association of County Officials, Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, and the non-judicial county officials are ones we work closely with. We do work closely with the Superior Court Judges Association, as well as the District and Municipal Court Association on a variety of issues. In particular, most recently in the Superior Court Association with the implementation of the Blake decision. We've worked closely with the Superior Court Judges Association as they have been instrumental in helping us understand the impact, along with the Clerks Association, of the impact of implementing the Blake decision. So we appreciate that relationship. Our current board and our current leadership is comprised always of, we rotate east-west in our leadership. Michael Largent is our immediate past president out of Whitman County. Councilmember Stevens out of San Juan. Mary Cooney out of Spokane is our incoming president in November. And Lisa Janicki is out of Skagit. So that's our current leadership. And then our board members, you can see there as well on the screen of who is on our current board of directors. We have regional representatives. Our 10 urban counties each get a seat, and then our leadership is their elected leaders of past presidents and our current executive committee. You'll see a little bit of their 2022 activities that we are focusing in on. Obviously, litigation is a component. We'll talk more about that in some of the filings and some of the activities that we have been engaged in here recently. We make appointments to statewide boards and commissions. It is an ongoing activity and one that the board takes very seriously. We're actually in the midst of reviewing the policy around appointments to statewide boards and commissions to make sure that we have good representation from out the state, making sure we're finding ways to get new elected commissioners and council members engaged as quickly as possible. This year was a really good example where we, I guess it was last year, where we had almost 40 new members elected out of the 139. 11 of our counties had new majorities to their council. So it was a major transition. This year probably won't be as significant because most counties only have 1 commissioner council member up, but it certainly trying to get our new members engaged as quickly as possible. We've created a strategic plan, so implementing our objectives and key results will be a strong component, making sure that fiscal and fiduciary responsibilities are met through our reviewing our financials, performing the audit, and you can see a number of other activities of which they are responsible for. We've got an upcoming board meeting May 11th, which is followed actually by a 12th and 13th for a legislative steering committee in Pierce County this coming about a month from now. I won't dwell on the message that I have, but I just would point out, and I hate to admit that I am in my 40th kind of tenure, 40 years in really in public service. And I can't tell you in my perspective that this has really been one of the most difficult series of years, the past 2-3 years, but certainly in the pandemic, that I've had to see the challenges that county elected officials and county officials have had to deal with. Delivering the service in the pandemic in a virtual environment for our staff, and the divisiveness of the pandemic. And it's just been a really challenging time for you all. And I'm just really amazed at the type of work that you all have done, and the dignity and the manner and the ethical way and the civil discourse way that most of you have all been able to carry yourself out. But that's just not the only challenge. Transportation funding, tax reform, GMA, land use, the challenges in the criminal justice system, obviously foundational public health services and the work we're doing in conjunction with that, behavioral health, housing, homelessness. It is just a myriad of issues that are really challenging for you all. I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for that. Obviously, the coronavirus pandemic and assisting counties respond has been one of the things we really had to transition hard to 2+ years ago. I was actually at a meeting with our public health jurisdictions. I think it was yesterday afternoon, and it was really a fairly quiet meeting. And it was like, I was just marveling back to what that meeting was like 2 years ago, where it was hair on fire, trying to really understand what was happening, both from an operations perspective, but a response perspective. So a lot's happened, and we've done a lot of work. We started our virtual assemblies in response to that, and that is an every Monday activity at noon, and always encourage folks to stay tuned with that. It clearly started as a way to understand what was happening with the pandemic, cross-sharing information from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, getting comments and speakers in from whether it was the governor himself to governor's office staff to Secretary of Health, state auditor, and the coronavirus relief fund, getting folks in from NACO to talk about ARPA, making sure we had someone from the state auditor to remind us of making sure that we did it correctly and that we would survive audit, all those types of things. But we started to transition those to a broader perspective of other ideas and areas. We brought in the public utility districts. Mason County was actually lifted up as one of the shining examples of how to partner with your public utility districts in response to utility payments. And so that was always one of the types of things, again, sharing best practices, but also sharing the needs that were out there. And obviously, we did not always agree as an association, and certainly as independent entities, with how the guidelines, the metrics, the phases, the opening dates were or were not being done. We were frustrated at times about not being heard effectively and constantly in contact with the governor's office. We would be told one thing on Thursday morning, and the announcement came out differently on Friday. Always trying to figure out the OPMA orders and open public meeting and what's happening in relationship to that. And we continue to have our virtual assemblies now, and they really are transitioning into other topical areas. And every Friday we send out kind of an announcement of what is going to be on that Monday virtual assembly. Encourage you to participate in those and take advantage of learning from your peers, as well as seeing what else is going on. So happy to stop there and see if anyone has any questions about the virtual assemblies, about where we're at in the pandemic, and our coronavirus relief. And we followed, I would just add one other thing is we spent a lot of time early on in particular, and it's really as came down, of really helping our departments, your departments, figure out how they were going to operate through the pandemic, from creating, really shutting down operations to continue to be able to deliver those operations and the sharing of best practices, I remember if you remember what was permitted in the first set of phases, 1 week we could do building permits and then we couldn't do building permits, and can we do building, and just sharing best practices of how counties could still operate their services from one to another. I wish I would have been in the plexiglass business because I think we spent a lot of money in courthouses on plexiglass. Helping the IT managers understand how we were going to deliver a virtual environment in a virtual workplace for so many people as we went into shutdown. So I'll just stop there and see if anyone has any questions or comments at that point.
I just have a quick comment on the virtual assemblies. I think that if, there's quite a few good things that came out of the COVID and the pandemic and transitioning into the virtual world. And I think that the virtual assemblies is one of those things that stands out. We were able to come together with not just council folks or commissioners, but with other county leaders as well. And I think the messages that were shared during those meetings was critical, and I'm hoping that we keep those going. I think they're great.
Yeah, it's definitely our intent. Oops, sorry about that. It's definitely our intent to keep those rolling. We are definitely committed to it and finding content. We actually have content now, I think, going clear through May, kind of scheduled, and we've got. I think we actually made an adjustment. We have the new director of the new broadband, new broadband director coming on Monday now, kind of on a changing of our schedule to get him in front of you all so that you can start to hear about what's going on with the state broadband office and how important that issue is, particularly as folks start to spend their ARPA dollars on broadband. And apply for broadband grants through CURB or Public Works Board or through the state broadband office. Great.
That's very cool. Or yeah, did you say the Public Works Board? I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, and Public Works Board. Yep, I think I said that one. CURB, Public Works Board. All right. Just to give you a snapshot, this is some of the more boring stuff at times, but one of the main responsibilities of our board of directors is their fiduciary responsibility and administration and budget, and it's to make sure that you have assurance of not just the fiduciary responsibilities being met, but where we're at as an association. We have also transitioned to do a little bit more management for some of our affiliate groups in terms of their fiduciary fiscal management, whether that's collecting their dues, but also assuring that we're producing financial statements, coordinating tax returns for a number of our groups as well. And this has emerged after an issue we had with our Association of County Human Services that had an embezzlement a number of years ago, where we needed to oversee and make sure that not just WSAC's financials were being done correctly, but our affiliate groups' assessments and financials were being done in concert with good internal controls and good financial practices. So we are in the midst of our own biennial audit. We have been doing them once every 2 years. We might be changing that back to annual audits, but it's be a recommendation that will come to our board of directors. Looking at our internal controls as we streamline our own internal operations, how do we make sure that we keep our internal controls in place so that you have good confidence in that the resources that are invested in the organizations are tracked appropriately, our accounts payable, accounts receivable, or deposits, all our internal controls are in place to make sure that those are done. We continually are looking at our dues structure and evaluate our methodologies. Is it time to do some restructuring of some of those dues structures? And so we're always looking at that. And then we don't have a firm financial reserve policy. So what's the right amount for a reserve policy to be had? We have a recommendation from a former audit that said we should have kind of two sets of reserves. One, an operating reserve, where like any small business, we have to have cash flow. And so what's that right amount? And we generally try and say about 3 months of cash flow is about right for us. At the end of the year, we need to have about a 3-month cash flow. And then our risk reserve is the fact that about 50% of our revenue on the due side comes from 3 counties. And so what happens if a Pierce, King, and Snohomish were to collectively leave at one time? How do you operate? And should you have a risk reserve manage any large entity from leaving your organization while you figure out that. And so we'll be working on a larger financial reserve and investment policy. Our financial summaries are found, I'm not sure, I lost track of where my pages actually are, but on page 9, you can see a little bit more about a quick snapshot of our financial situation of the organization. We've always hovered around and tried to stay in the vicinity of about 50% of our dues generate about that percentage of our revenue. You can see we're about 54%, higher than we have been. At the lowest point, we were about 43% of our revenue came from our dues. So dues continues to be the major portion of the organizational budget. We do special assessments for projects from time to time. If you recall, we did the marble brulette assessment, and that was a special assessment to really understand the impact of environmental protections that we're having on our trust lands and our trust land program and our revenue generation from timber. We get revenue from our affiliate groups. We do contract services for a number of our affiliates, both County Engineers Association and the Public Health affiliate both generate several $100,000 for us to deliver direct services to them in association management. So that's that. We have contract services. So this is a big piece of what we do with our transportation program. We get about, this depends on the biennium, but we get about $1 million of biennium from the state transportation budget to do county transportation studies. And so we're in the midst of working on a couple with the County Road Administration Board. We also did a big study on county fiscal health in the transportation world. We had a Burke Associate study that we completed last biennium. We're doing one on the potential of what can happen within franchises and generating revenue from franchise agreements within the county road right away to potentially generate revenue for the county road system. So we've got a number of studies that are underway. Those are contract revenue coming in, and most that's contract in, contract out in terms of revenue. We were doing a study this year also on, it's a limited study within a limited geographic area. It's about a $300,000 study and implementing some things associated with it's called legacy pesticide that in some of our central Washington counties, a pesticide that's in soil. And when there's new home constructions that are now in those transitioning old agricultural areas, particularly on fields that have been historically had orchards on them, is how do you make sure that you've got a soil bank necessarily or capping those properties so that we've got a study going on with those counties as well. So different things are going on from a variety of perspectives. You can see there are other revenue sources, conference revenue sources, investment revenue, and we get some non-dues revenues from Nationwide Insurance is our number one, where we generate almost $100,000 from our partnership with Nationwide for the 457 deferred compensation program that all of our counties participate in. So a quick snapshot. Our biggest revenue growth in the past timeframe has been our litigation program, where we went from not having a litigation program to now generating about $400,000 a year in our litigation program. I'll talk more about that, but that's probably our number one revenue source that has the most dramatic change over the period of time. Contract services as well, depending on what has been going on with the services that we're delivering. Again, kind of money in, money out, depending on what types of services we're going to contract with during that period of time. But in general, we've been fairly fiscally sound, fiscally healthy. We do a budget outlook for when we develop a budget, and the board and ultimately the membership adopts a budget. We do a 4-year projection. So what decisions we're making today, both on the revenue expenditure side, we do the analysis to say, are they sustainable over the next 4-year period?
And a note should go out because you might not deal with Bridget Loughlin, our Director of Finance, but she's developed programs for WSAC, which every time we make a change takes it out 5 or 6 years. So when we're looking at these different programs and different revenues, when we start putting the budget together, it goes a lot smoother than it used to, and we're able to look at a lot of different factors and how they will play out in future years, whether we need to raise dues or not. She gives us a really accurate picture. which is a lot better than when I first joined the board.
Yeah, thank you. And where does our spending go? You know, we're going to be about a $3.4 million operating budget this period. Obviously, our policy budget is one of our largest areas where we focus on when you look at our 6 FTEs, it's clearly one of our largest areas. What we're doing within the policy world and the advocacy world, our member services is about 4 FTEs. Our administration and financial logistics and a number of contracted services. Mike Hoover, for example, is a contract lobbyist for us. We've got 2 contractors in our field for timber, Fort Stanley and Mike McKeeson. And then we also are working closely with our timber counties, or excuse me, our coastal caucus. Bryn Brady has been a contractor for us for a number of years within that arena. So we're a mixture of both FTEs that are county employees, but then we do have a number of contracted professionals and service contracts that help us implement the strategic plan and the operational goals of the organization. I will keep going. You're going to get a sense of what, where we've been at in terms of cash balance, end of the year, ending fund balances, et cetera. So, you can see we've been fairly financially stable, and at least our net asset changes are in the right direction compared to perhaps other entities. Definitely, it reflects potentially in some regards the status of counties, which in general has been probably as financially stable as they have been in a long time. That's not necessarily what the long-term outlook might be, but definitely sales tax has been really stable the last year or so. Property tax has remained stable. Real estate excise tax has been good. Forest harvest has generally been stable. So most of our major revenue sources have been stable in most counties, not universally true, but in most counties. I'm not sure completely how Mason has done, but most of our counties have been as financially stable as they have been in a while. Obviously, advocacy is the big piece of this book of business. This is where there was a major investment made on behalf of the organization this last year, and that was in some greater strength within our policy support. And 2 of these positions came from outside support, and that was in our Foundation of Public Health Services. We brought in 2 additional staff to help our local health jurisdictions implement foundational public health services, as well as really make sure that we find our niche, and in some regards make sure that we strengthen our local public health system so that the concept of regionalization and the concept of the state having a role in local public health services to the degree that some might want, that we're able to identify where does it make sense that we find our own regional investments, and that we don't need the state coming in to tell us to regionalize, but how do we find our own regional support. So we've got the new folks working on that. We just brought in 2 new staff members that will start. Curtis Steinauer comes to us from Grays Harbor County. He will be joining us as a policy analyst and kind of a general policy analyst, and Travis Stutton joins us from Clark County, and he'll be in natural resources. So Travis will be supporting Paul Jewell. Curtis will largely be supporting Melanie and the work that we'll be doing, both in understanding better ARPA work, ARPA technical assistance, how counties are spending their ARPA, making sure that we communicate probably through some graphic and on an ongoing basis of how counties are spending their $1.5 billion, and giving both the delegation and the public confidence that we're accountable for how our 39 counties are spending $1.5 billion in ARPA funds. And then starting to see the trends as well of how those ARPA dollars are being invested. It was a 60-day legislative session. It was a fast and furious, and actually probably one of the busiest paced 60-day session. It felt like a 105-day session crammed into 60 days. This was anything but a supplemental budget where really there was $5 billion in new spending within that supplemental budget. It just wasn't tweaks. It was really new spending proposals that went on. And then you find the $17 billion transportation package also within that period of time. So it was crazy. We have a completely different session report that I provided for you, and we're happy to go through that in any detail or ask questions about answer any questions about that as well. At the same time, we have a legislative steering committee. Commissioner Trask, thanks so much for your participation in that and your diligence in participating in that. Kate Dean from Jefferson County, just north of you, is a co-chair, and Brad Peck from Franklin County is a co-chair. We rotate east and west. They both renew this year, so they got thrown into the fire pretty quickly on some really meaty topical areas and topical issues. We are in the midst of, while we're producing a report on the outcomes of the 22 legislative session, we are in the midst of planning the 23-24 legislative agenda. That will be the purpose of our May 12th and 13th legislative steering committee, where our group will gather to start to think about, what are the issues that we need to address, certainly during the 23 legislative session, the first year of the biennial budget. And starting to think about what is our biennial strategy. And that seems early, but we're going to be able to make the interim productive. We really do need to get topics in front of the legislature as early as we possibly can, and that's during the interim, which we're in the midst of. So getting this going, getting 23 preparing for 2023 is really important. So we'll gladly be listening to you all and have some strategies to engage more than just the legislative steering committee, but also administrators, other affiliate groups, other independent elected officials, the judicial branch, others, in gathering ideas and input into what should be on our legislative agenda. You can see the LSC roster. As I indicated, all 39 counties plus the 4 county executives have representatives on LSC. And we're pretty good about getting, that 35-ish or so folks present at all LSC meetings. So we have pretty good attendance. This year, it was all virtual. Again, this is hopefully our last year of virtual, but I think we're probably going to be in the world of hybrid for a long time. I think a number of our members have acclimated as well to hybrid, that instead of driving 12 hours for a 4-hour meeting and then turning, maybe it's more effective. At the same time, we find the value of having people in Olympia where they can meet with the legislature, meet with their peers, that I don't think we see that going away. I think we're going to want to make sure that we get people back in Olympia, particularly with the legislature.
Excuse me.
I don't know if Commissioner Trask, if you have any comment about that. I know both the other 2 commissioners at some point have been on LSC as well. So if you have any questions or comments about LSC or thoughts about how we prepare for 2023 and 2024 would be great.
I'll jump in real quick. I think this was probably one of the most active years that for LSC, and also for the Public Works Board, for being in contact with our legislators. It was a lot of fun testifying and writing letters and emails, and I do feel like as a whole we made a difference. I think that we worked well together, and it was also kind of easier to send in those emails if it was an urgent, call to action. Being in front of your computer all the time, 10 hours a day, made it a little bit easier to get those responses in quicker. So virtual was okay. I did miss being on the steps though, and talking to people.
Yeah, and I guess I'll say just from my experience, one of the nice things about the legislative steering committee is that once there's consensus from the counties on what the priorities are, and there's agreement on how we're going to go forward, there's really an impressive amount of unity amongst the counties, and I think that's a testament, Eric, to staff and their preparedness and their willingness to get commissioners and council members briefed up and prepared to have those conversations with legislators. And so, I think there are going to be some opportunities heading into the 2023 session. Obviously, it's a long session. It's the big budget session, and so in particular where we've made some gains across the state on behavioral health, on housing and homelessness. I think there's an opportunity to really lean in more on those priorities heading into 2023. And as both Commissioners Trask and Netherland know, a lot of that work happens outside of session. Just being able to tee up those conversations and so I think even though Commissioner Netherland and I are no longer on the steering committee, whatever we can do to support the organization and support Commissioner Trask in that work, I think we're ready to continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with all of you on it.
Yeah, great, thank you. And again, as you start to think about a 23-24 legislative agenda, if there's issues that you've identified that our barriers need fixing beyond, obviously the county financial picture, while might have been stable, is that that's not necessarily long term. So just being able to continue to bring that point out is a continual challenge for us. Let me talk about a little bit about the areas of legislative priorities that we have been focusing in on. And I don't know if these will continue on, but clearly the things that we did, we were actually just were talking about a number of those, Commissioner Schutte, in regard to behavioral health and the response, affordable housing, homelessness, the things that we are trying to do in terms of public health, and probably really making folks really aware that so much attention was brought to public health during the pandemic, but there is an ongoing responsibility for us to deal with chronic disease, to deal with communicable disease, the things that we do with foodborne illness and food inspections and tuberculosis and other things of septics, other environmental pieces that people have kind of forgotten about as the core of what you do on a regular basis, are really important. Obviously, broadband access has been one of those big pieces for us in relationship to the pandemic. Brought a lot of that to light about how do we support whether it's education, whether it's telemedicine, whether it's a diversified economic base. We're talking with Councilmember Stevens about people in the islands complaining about all these visitors here. Well, these were actually people that were now utilizing their second home as their residence, because they could now work full time and live in a destination based location. And so how do you make sure you've got that broadband capability? We're jokingly, Commissioner Trask, the cybersecurity expert for the Homeland Security was in Mason County in a very poor connection, I might add, which I chuckled at. How can a regional head of cybersecurity have such poor internet access? But yeah, so it's really true. It's going to be one of our economic challenges and one of our capabilities that's been identified through the crisis of how do we strengthen that. And obviously there's elements within the environment. In GMA, we made probably some of the biggest and most, Paul likes to claim it was the most changes to GMA since 1992. I'm not quite sure I agree with him, since I saw one of the big changes as well, but we made some really good progress. We were able to change from 8 years to 10 years for updates. We're able to do some things around LAMERS that we had been trying to work on. We got some climate in the right direction, and even some funding for that. And it was just going to apply to the big urban counties. So there's some big things that we're able to get, but that actually didn't pass. That was 1099. But that one will be back. And again, we're wanting to make sure that we don't necessarily need all 39 counties to be doing certain things, but we do need them in certain areas. And so for the first time, we were getting some acknowledgement that one size doesn't necessarily fit all in the planning world as well. There was a riparian protection that we never even got to the point of necessarily talking about the policy behind it, just the way you couldn't implement what was being proposed. And so that that ended up not even getting good work. And I hate to say that we spent a lot of time killing bills than supporting them, but this was a good example where Paul in particular and myself worked really hard just to lay out the challenges of implementation, let alone is it the right policy or not. You can't even do what you want to do within the framework that how it was drafted. And again, it shows a lack of interest in potentially the executive branch, in this case, of partnering with us to say, this is what our goal is, how do we make this work? And so, and that bill died a pretty sudden death, actually, which was, it'll be back, but hopefully it'll be back in a way that is both operational and something that we can support. Spent a lot of time around the social inequities, the Blake decision. We were able to get significant resources to implement the Blake decision. In the end, even what's going to be called a refund bureau at that administrator of the courts, going to take some pressure off your county clerks and county auditors of having to pay refunds. And that's going to take about a year to stand up, but long term, that's going to be really beneficial for our clerks of the boards and for auditors to have a refund bureau, and not going to necessarily take away the backlog in the superior courts, but we've got some additional resources that it's going to assist in some of those types of activities. We still have yet to achieve our goal, frankly, in inadequate funding for trial court public defense, and we'll talk a little bit more about potential litigation around that here in a moment as well. And then long-term investments is road maintenance. We were able to get a few resources, not nearly about how much we had hoped for, but we were able to get some resources, not to the degree, as I indicated, as much as we had wanted in the transportation package. We're going to have to stay engaged in this as they start to think about what the next revenue source for the road system is, because so much of the transportation package was funded with non-gas, it was non-gas tax, it was the climate change dollars. But as we move back into a system to fund traditional transportation, whether it's a road usage charge, whether it's gas taxes, how do we get the right amount to support our county road system? And that'll be part of our longer term strategy. It will probably be part of our strategy working in the interim as well as in 23-24 as additional transportation funding needs are addressed through preservation of the other portions of the county road systems in particular. I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions on the session. We do have a completely separate document, and depending on time and your interest, we can run through our end of session report that's produced for you, but happy to answer any general questions about a session. The session report, which I could switch back to here, is also a copy of what was produced for you. Again, it's done at a fairly high level, in similar breakdown of what we just talked about, but it highlights bills that were passed and a few that we were able to kill, but it largely follows our priority as well. So happy to answer any questions about the session before I move on to out of policy and advocacy.
Anything, commissioners?
Nothing yet. It was quite the adventure.
Great.
Well, let me talk about federal priorities. This is just a quick summary of a larger document, and I can electronically send to you our federal priorities list. Commissioner Trask, you're on our federal priorities and federal issues in Relations Committee. It's been a really good group. We really matured in this area. When I started, we would go back to DC and we'd meet with our delegation members, and they would call what I would call social visits. And we were losing our opportunity to really talk to our delegation members about the nexus between decisions and particularly funding or decisions that were being made at the federal level and the impact that they were having at the county level and the county operations. And so we really pivoted about a decade ago to start to say, we're going to utilize our, not get as in-depth as we do with state policy and state advocacy and lobbying, but we're certainly going to pivot to talk about more directly the relationship to the decisions that are being made at the federal level and what's happening here. And so we have a set of federal priorities that you can see here. Again, we want to make sure that there's enough federal resources coming down to preferably the counties, but if not, at least to the state and through the counties, so that we could in fact have not having to spend our local dollars on pandemic relief, and frankly. And one of the direct areas that we wanted and were able to achieve this within the ARPA dollars is all 39 counties got direct payment of ARPA dollars. And that was a significant importance to us. With the coronavirus relief funds, 4 counties got a direct payment. And those 4 counties, King, Pierce, Snohomish, and Spokane, counties over 500,000, they got about 3 times as much money as the counties that did not get a direct payment, that depended on getting the money from the state and pass through Department of Commerce. Our counties were able to get the complete 45% that was recommended out of Congress, so we feel really good about that. We worked hard with the executive branch to do that, but getting that direct appropriation to all 39 counties is really good. It didn't happen for the cities. Cities under 50,000 all still had to go through the state to get their resources and get the contracts, et cetera. So that was a major element, and we really appreciated the success that we were able to get that. Medicaid inmate exclusion is a policy that we've been working on. We actually have a little progress at the state to try and seek a Medicaid waiver, 1115 waiver. This is a situation where the point of inmate is incarcerated, they lose their federal benefit for Medicaid, Medicare. And obviously Medicaid that we're most interested in this situation, but they lose their federal benefit, and we become immediately responsible for all of their care, pre-adjudication. We might release them in 2 days, we might only hold them, we might have to pay for their care before they're even adjudicated, and that's just really an unfair burden not only on the counties, but now we release these individuals who are not necessarily a vulnerable population that have to go and reinstate those federal benefits, and that's a real problem. And so trying to get that taken care of, we could use the federal solution. Absent that, we are trying to get a state waiver and working with our healthcare authority to be able to secure an 1115 waiver so that we can at least see a suspension of benefits and always assure that pre-adjudication, those benefits are still in place. Payment in lieu of taxes, PILT, and I've got a chart on page 17 that you can see how Mason County does in this world. If I could scroll down to that one too, you might have to put your bifocals on to be able to see this portion. But Mason and PILT gets $331,000 in PILT. This is for largely Forest Service land, a little bit probably Olympic National Park land, and then $300,000 in secure rural schools. And so those are really important resources, as you can see, for a number of counties, even more so. And this chart also shows other federal payments that and state payments that come from public land payments. And so these are really important dollars. We spend a lot of time advocating on both the state and federal for both our state and federal land payments. So scroll back up, secure rural schools. And then infrastructure funding, where we actually did see some strong federal funding support in our aging infrastructure, good broadband investment. We did able to get in the state transportation budget some language that was giving us some concern about the allocation and split. So we're able to not see a dedicated split between state and locals in the transportation budget, but sent that to the traditional process to have a committee really look at that to assure that we are more collaborative in understanding how much of the state transportation formula dollars should go to the locals and how much should go cities and counties and how much should go to the state. And so we're pretty excited about getting the formula split out of the transportation budget that would have been pretty harmful. It would have been about 85-15, which is far more in favor of the state than historically has been in the past. It's been closer to about a 65-35 split. And then active forest management, catastrophic fire, again, wanting to see active management return to the U.S. Forest Service in a way that particularly is more sustainable, that improves forest health, and that really protects from these catastrophic fires, which then increases sedimentation and the type of salmon recovery type of work that we're doing. Even the West Side forests are starting to see fires in fire-prone areas that we've never seen historically. And whether you want to blame climate change or poor forest management practices or not adapting the forest to warmer, drier summers are the things that are happening. So anyway, that's in a nutshell kind of our federal piece. You can see and take a look at our Federal Relations Committee, and that committee is becoming really robust and really engaged, and really appreciate the work that they're doing. So any questions on any of the federal issues? I know I did send out alert to some of the budget folks, and I think some of our commissioners about a looming issue that we are tracking, and it's hard to say whether it's dead or alive right now, but the local assistance and tribal consistency dollars, which was set aside $1.5 billion, $750 million for each of fiscal year 22 and federal fiscal year 22 and 23, where the potential sweep of those resources, at least half of those resources potentially back into another COVID type package. Hard to say whether that's going to move or not. It seems to be stalled right now, but we're pretty concerned about seeing that. We estimate it would probably be about a $30 million loss each fiscal year to our 39 counties. Most of our counties all get some type of PILT payment, and they would be the ones that would be hardest hit by this. So if you see any of your congressional delegation, please mention to them to, two things. One, don't take the money, and number two, let's get U.S. Treasury off the dime and get those monies out to counties, because they've been sitting on them for a year now. So appreciate that.
Well, that's just what I was going to ask you to go over. So you beat me to the punch, I guess.
Yeah. So we're, it's stalled now. It's tied up in the politics of DC. Apparently with the immigration reform, and it's amazing how they can link different things together, but they do. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. I did speak with both Senator Cantwell and Senator Murray's staff yesterday about it. And, one of the things that they are unfortunately touting is that the bill also allows for broader use of your ARPA dollars, expands some of your ARPA usage to greater capital investment, which may be helpful, but most of our counties have already done their ARPA planning spend. So going back out to your community and now saying you're going to spend your ARPA dollars differently may be problematic as well. So stay tuned to that one. Let me transition to what's your timing? We want to be respectful of your time as well. We generally don't want to overstep our bounds.
So this is all we have. So I think we're okay on time.
Okay. I've got want to go over our litigation program and just a couple other quick things, and then we just throw it open for questions. Yeah, our litigation program is focused in two areas. One, where we are the lead plaintiff, and number two, where we do a lot of amicus briefs. We have we've authorized for two current litigation activities. We have not started our indigent defense litigation yet, but we are authorized by our board of directors, and we've been working on finding co-plaintiffs. We now have 3 county co-plaintiffs of Kitsap, Lincoln, and Yakima counties. We're still hoping to see if we can get someone in the public defender world as a co-plaintiff, but we've not been able to secure that yet. We're doing a lot of analysis of indigent defense across the state of Washington to have in our complaint, and we are preparing budget information, because one of the key elements that the state is going to argue, because we've seen what their argument was in what was called the Davidson case, which was went clear to the Supreme Court. It was a juvenile case out of Grays Harbor County, where basically ACLU sued that the state was not meeting its duty to assure the adequacy of indigent defense in a juvenile case. And the state basically argued that we have no responsibility and no liability because we delegated this authority to the counties and we give them taxing authority to pay for this service. And that's their argument. And so we don't think their argument's going to change much. We unfortunately think they might be correct in that they may have the constitutional duty to delegate it as their agent of the state constitutionally. The state didn't completely rule, the Supreme Court didn't completely rule on that. But they basically said, but you've not proven that you've adequately provided funding capabilities to counties to deliver this. And so there's going to be a number of pieces to that. And so we're working on a number of budget documentation and scenarios, because not all counties are equal in the ability to generate revenue. And Mason County is a classic example of that. Mason County has per capita one of the lowest sales tax per capita generations. And if you compare that to a King County or even a San Juan County, they get a lot more per capita in sales tax generation. So saying that there's equity across the way a county generates revenue is just not true. Some counties generate their revenue through timber. So there's big volumes, really big swings in that. Property tax per capita rates are, very dramatically to some counties that are nearing their 225 per thousand cap, the counties that are probably under $1 per thousand. As I look at San Juan County, I think King might be under $1 as well per thousand. So there's just a big swing in whether or not a county can generate that. Then you add all of our constitutional duties and our statutory duties. Is there adequacy from the state to be able to do that? And is it uniformly delivered across the state? So we got a lot of work yet to do as we drop the complaint. We have Pacifica Law Groups, our outside legal counsel, and so we do intend to file it, but we are still doing a lot of the background work before we file the complaint. So happy to take any questions on indigent defense before I move on to the next case. Okay. And just to let you know, we are still open to any co-plaintiffs. We're not searching them actively, but just to let you know, if you want to, there is going to be a cost around, because I think your county will be under a little greater budget scrutiny as we do the work associated with those counties on being able to demonstrate in deeper dive why necessarily the states can't meet are not meeting their duty, even if under their argument. Blake decision. This is, if you recall, the Supreme Court ruled about a year ago that, a 50-year-old law was unconstitutional, and that was what was called strict liability. And I probably shouldn't venture into, I don't know if Judge Cobb is on here still, because he probably talked about the case a lot more articulately, but it was basically if let's say, I borrowed my son's car and my son's jacket, and I get pulled over and I get searched, and inside my son's jacket is some sort of illegal substance. I am now assumed to have known that it's there. I'm assumed to be in possession, and therefore, under that strict liability, I am prosecuted under that, regardless of whether I even ever knew that drug was with me. And that strict liability was ruled unconstitutional, and which put in motion a decision by the Supreme Court to say you have to refund legal financial obligations, which is one of our biggest challenges, and that is hundreds of millions of dollars is our guess. You have to resentence those, so that's prosecutor time, that's judicial time, that's public defender time, that's clerk time. So you have all of these activities and costs associated with that. And so we entered in, along with, I think we had 21 counties as co-plaintiffs, to enter into a lawsuit that would say the state is fully responsible for the costs associated with implementing the Blake decision. And number two, this is the bigger decision that has been filed but has not gone anywhere. It's a separate case by a separate entity that basically said there are other legal obligations that should come, let's say I was I drove for United Parcel Service and I was arrested. I lost my job. I lost my earning power. The state owes me more than just legal financial obligations. They owe me lost income. They owe me, there are some additional liabilities that the state owes me, or the county could also be brought into that lawsuit. And the county was brought into the lawsuit. We argued to get ourselves out of it, but we're still in this lawsuit and we've not dropped it. So far, the state has been paying for legal financial obligations. They are providing us monies to support courts and the clerks and being able to bill some of those times. But our bigger fear is, are there other potential civil cases on the horizon, either in class action civil lawsuit, which was brought by the Civil Survival Project, which has not moved forward in the court system. And our bigger concern is that there are other liabilities and civil lawsuits out there that we may need the protection of to assure that, listen, this was not our law. Our superior courts and our prosecutors are agents of the state that were acting in implementing state law. This wasn't a county ordinance that we're trying to defend, that all of the obligations linked to the state. And so we think we've got a strong argument, but at the same time, that case is still kind of sitting there waiting to see how the state responds in making sure that they compensate counties for our implementation of the law. I don't know if there's questions on the Blake decision.
Eric, my understanding is that the state is actually taking the responsibility of administering the refunds back. And so that's going to be a huge lift off of our staff to not have to go back through and calculate what they would have to pay back these individuals.
They will. That will be through the administrator of the courts, but that does not take effect until July 1, 2023. So we will still be processing, unless they can get their legal financial obligation refund bureau up sooner. They have about a year to stand that group up.
Well, that's good to know. Because I thought that it seemed like here in Mason County, those involved just kind of, pushed their hands away and said, "Oh, great, we don't have to do anything anymore." So
yeah, no, they'll still be having to do it for another year. Now we will be getting paid for it, and we can bill for our time, and we can bill for the legal financial obligation. So yes, but the clerk and the auditor are still going to need to be working on that for. My understanding will be through about another year.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Judge Cobb, and we do probably 8 to 15 or 20 of those every week. And the prosecutor, the defense counsel, and the courts and clerks are calculating refunds, seeing what gets transferred to other cases with outstanding LFO. So we are still engaged in that process, and it's fairly time consuming. Yep.
Yeah, and we do anticipate that, and I think a lot of that is still going to be continuing. The question of who then pays it, the legal financial obligation, the refund bureau. We still think the superior court judge, prosecutor, and public defender are all still going to be engaged. It's just then who pays the refund, and it'll come then out of the state refund bureau that the administrative court administers. So. Then the last one is the most recent case that we did not prevail at. We did and we didn't prevail. I shouldn't be pessimistic about it. We got clarity, and this was dealing with the unfunded mandate case associated with the ballot drop box bill, where we argued that it was an unfunded mandate pursuant to 43-135-060. It required about 250 new ballot drop boxes. That were required to be put in at cost of about $1 million was the estimate, and about $250,000 in maintenance and operation a year. And the state argued that it was, the state actually pivoted in the midst of the case around what their argument should be, in addition to the fact that the legislature went back and tried to correct to make sure it was not an unfunded mandate by doing some things associated with adding some things into what they would pay for, as well as paying for both even and odd year elections at this point. And they really pivoted to, and I know Mark, you lived this and knows this pretty in-depthly when you're Secretary of State days. They really referred to the fact that that RCW 29A04430, which allows county auditors to disperse election costs across everyone that pays for elections, was the controlling statute, and it was not the unfunded mandate statute. That because the legislature had created a way to pay for and have the counties impartial reimbursed for elections costs, that was the controlling statute, and it was not the unfunded mandate statute. They did say the counties are entitled to reimbursement for the state's proportional share of any of these costs, and so if we have the ability to make sure the state pays for there. The real burden is going to fall upon most of the costs for many of these cases, or for most of our elections, are paid for by other entities. They're paid for by cities, they're paid for by special purpose districts, school districts, etc. And so really, if there are new election costs to be borne, they're going to be borne by other entities if your county auditor is doing a full cost accounting and being able to disperse these costs out to everyone else. Because we're not going to be able to get the state to pay those through the unfunded mandate statute. They've given us clear direction that no, there's another controlling manner in which that county should seek reimbursement. And then they did some amendments, and the manner in which they did the amendment, they did it not by title. They didn't include certain activities to amend. They didn't amend 43-135-060, and they ruled that that did not violate Article 2, Section 37, which is you can't. You have to amend. You have to amend the statute by referencing it in the title, or being more specific. You can't bury a reference. And the Supreme Court in themselves, in the oral arguments, actually acknowledged that they have muddied this water with their own rulings in the past around what does Article 2, Section 37 actually mean. So they're trying to, I think, bring some continuity in their rulings. I think probably most alarming to us in some regards is the courts really made it clear that even though we incur costs because we think we have a vested right to full reimbursement under the unfunded mandate, they basically said, listen, until there's an adjudication of an unfunded mandate, don't expect to ever be able to get those back. And so we really are, it's kind of like, wow, every time we think there's an unfunded mandate, we're going to have to either adjudicate that, or we're going to have to think about another capability or capacity to figure that one out. The case was remanded to King County Superior Court for further proceedings, which could include the manner in which a number of our counties that did have claims into the state, we had about 10 counties, in addition to 3 co-plaintiff counties, Whitman, Snohomish, and Kittitas, to make sure that any costs consistent with this case could be paid, including the state's proportional share of those costs that might not have already been paid. So anyway, I think the long-term message for us really is, is what will the state's argument be if there's not an unfunded, if there's not another controlling mechanism for cost reimbursement. So let's say, I think you own a utility, I think is a good example. Let's say there's a new state law that dramatically increases the cost of operating a utility, but yet they've given you authority to generate revenue to pay for the cost of operating that utility. That's not going to be considered probably an unfunded mandate. They probably would say the state has given you the ability to generate revenue to pay for the operations of that system, regardless of what might get added to it. So there's some things that will have to get flushed out. This started out as a really clean unfunded mandate case and got muddied pretty quickly. So stay tuned. It gave us some additional, there's not much case law on unfunded mandates. It gave us some direction and some clarification, which was good, and some frustration as well. I don't know if there's any questions on the unfunded mandate case. And then amicus briefs, it's actually been a really quiet amicus brief period, and that I suspect is because, as Judge Cobb knows, civil cases probably took a back seat. They were much, they didn't, criminal prosecution and the pandemic, no court, no jury trials. It was just been a slow couple of years in terms of amicus briefs. So we were averaging Gosh, we were averaging about 6 a year. I think we're down to, I think, 2 active amicus briefs right now. So not much, not nearly as much going on. I suspect that will pick back up, but largely they've got to be very focused around kind of the organic responsibility of county government. We try and work with prosecuting attorneys to submit the briefs. We will work with outside legal counsel if we have to, but we generally try and work with county prosecuting attorneys to submit briefs on behalf of the counties. And so, for good working relationship with the. Just quickly hit on a couple of things. Obviously, we do a lot in terms of something new that we're launching, which is a new job board that we are in the midst of launching for counties. We've got our business partner program that I'll skim through real quick. We have trainings, Twitter, Facebook, email, website, all that kind of information. Hope you can get to our conference. We're in King County this year at the Hyatt Regency on Lake Washington in Renton on November 15th, 16th, 17th. So hold your dates for that. And hopefully you can make it up to that. We've also have started our County Development Institute, which is really new training for our newly elected officials in a more systematic way. So we're pretty excited about that. A number of our business programs, which you can see on pages 22 and 23. Many counties participate in one or all of these different types of programs. And if you want more information on any of these, please feel free to reach out to either our contact or give me a call on some of those as well. And then I would just add and end with, we have a number of programmatic areas that we work on, but coastal counties, Commissioner Oeson up in Skagit is the chair of that group. Brandon Brady is our program consultant, really focuses on implementation of the Puget Sound Partnership. That's what really the birth of it, but we look at a broader perspective of issues associated with what's going on in Puget Sound, Greater Fuca, Hood Canal, Pacific Ocean, but issues that are supported with that and some of the activities around that program. Columbia River Caucus, kind of the peer to the Coastal Caucus is the Columbia River Group. And it started working with the Columbia River Basin Water Supply Development Program in 2006. And counties were actually listed as needed to be consulted with in the implementation of that. So we have a partnership with the Office of Columbia River and Department of Ecology in implementing that program. And then our Timber and Public Lands program, of which many of you have joined in the past as well, where really all 39 of our counties have public land interests. About 29 counties have an interest in timber to some degree or another. So I'm going to stop there. That's a quick snapshot. Happy to answer any questions. We always like to hear a little bit more about what are some of the local issues. If there's issues with the WSAC Mason County relationship, wanting to follow up on, and just really appreciate your service and glad to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Eric. Commissioners, any questions or comments for Eric?
I have one for you. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. How are you doing with recruitment and retention? Seems like we were all going with our, during the pandemic, like Eric said, hair on fire, and then we found out everyone wanted to move to a rural area, so we have no housing. And now we found out, gee, you don't have to necessarily live in Mason County to work there. Or in King County, you can live in Mason County. But I'm just wondering, are you experiencing the recruitment and retention issues that others are?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. Yeah, we're definitely seeing it. We're seeing it on the law enforcement side, most notably in our jail, but also I think we're going to start to see some struggles even on the patrol side based on conversations with our sheriff, but we're also seeing it in some of our other positions as well. Commissioners or Mark, do you have any detail to add to that?
It sounds to me like I think we've had many positions that have been open for quite a while. I don't know whether people retired or just don't want to work in positions, but I think some of them were having issues hiring for. Sounds like other counties might probably, or might be having the same issues too.
It goes down as far as even our truck drivers for our road department, where we used to get 15 applications, we're lucky to get 5.
Actually just had a meeting with administrators and other governmental entities around Mason County here this morning. And they were talking about openings in our fire departments. And I don't know if you all remember, years ago when they had an opening in the fire department, it was people were camped out the night before. 200 people would come in. They had to limit the number of applications that they'd release. And now it's completely dried up. So we're really struggling on finance individuals, and I hear that is a similar struggle with other entities here in Mason County that are looking for similar skill sets. And as Commissioner Schutte mentioned, the law enforcement side of things is pretty scary. I mean, when we're looking at the other entities that are what they're doing to attract people, it's pretty considerable. I'm hearing of bonuses, 25 to $40,000 for individuals to come work for an entity, which in government to me has been kind of unheard of.
Mhm.
And it seems like it's continuing to escalate, Eric. We've got this, it's almost a competition, right? Kitsap County offers $25,000 bonus. Their neighboring county offers 26. The other thing that they're going to is some entities are going to a 4-day work week and actually shutting down their operations on Fridays, which isn't possible in some of the services that we provide. And the community doesn't shut down on Fridays. We've got to offer those services and be available for them. So I don't know that would be even something that the commissioners would entertain. So yes, answer your question is we're having significant challenges recruiting.
Yeah, it's really an interesting dilemma. And I think Commissioner Netherland, I mean, I've heard this from, those were really sought after jobs, being working for the county road crew. And we have counties that are not getting applicants for county road crew positions because the private sector job market is booming, and compensation might be better or work out. I'm not sure, but boy, it's definitely a change. We've got a couple of counties. Adams County, this seems really strange to me. They actually started an apprenticeship program for their road crew because they wanted to start. They couldn't attract people, so they started talking to 18-year-olds coming out of high school that wanted to be that they could start to train into their program. Yeah.
And I know we're small, but I think we should be, we not only should be, we probably will be having those discussions soon on providing those opportunities here. I don't see we're going to have much other choices.
We actually are, Commissioner Netherland, starting that program out of Public Works. So we hire summer helpers. And so we're going to use that as an opportunity to identify individuals that would be good candidates for coming into something like that. And then looking for opportunities to provide some, maybe in a sense of educational reimbursement that we have in other areas, giving individuals the opportunity to potentially be reimbursed for getting your CDL license, some of those things.
No. And I assume same thing with IT, engineers, all of those type of professional level positions are just really hard for us to attract and retain countywide.
We're at 25% in our engineering staff in Public Works. And we're in search of a right-of-way agent for a long time and finally just hired one. Hopefully they stick with us. They have a lot of experience, super excited about the individual coming on, but definitely a necessary skill set that we need.
Well, do you have an uplifting question you'd like to ask now?
Sorry. Well, we're having the same issue just in finance, IT, planning and permitting. And then we're running into the other small county thing of you train a planner, and then they get a better job elsewhere.
So, and I don't know how, I mean, I think Mason's in this very unique position. We faced it in Lewis to a degree. We weren't surrounded to the degree I think Mason is, where you can go to Kitsap, you can go to Olympia and Thurston, where you can go either one of those two directions, and have an employer that is probably paying 20% more. And now you got to commute, or now maybe you don't even have to commute, depending on what might be happening. In Lewis, we were always just faced with going north. You know, Cowlitz wasn't necessarily a draw for us, but yeah, I think that's a real challenge. And I don't know about you as well, but the other public employers in the community also were generally paying better than the county, and so we saw a draw on that as well.
Sierra Pacific is doing that also. They're recruiting out of high school and paying a fairly good living wage, especially for an entry level job. But I think Thurston and Kitsap and Olympia definitely take our well-trained folks.
As does PUD 3.
The PUD.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the PUD was one that we always pointed to. They played very well across the board. What are some of the other major pressing issues? Maybe just quick minutes.
I know at the last virtual, we talked about jails quite a bit. Sounds like every county is having the same issue. So maybe you could reach out to our NACO folks and tell them to work at the federal level to get jails for us all.
And you're trying to build one, right?
I think we're all still in the process of seeing. I mean, gosh, they're expensive, and then you have so many other issues that come along with it, like staffing and all the other expenses too. So it's not as easy as people think.
Mark, were you at Thurston when they went through their fun times about building it and then not being able to operate it?
Right in the middle of it, yeah. Definitely lessons learned there that wouldn't want to repeat.
We're lucky to have Mark.
Yeah, it's just I mean, it's a challenge, guys. It's I think that we've studied it a lot here. I've just started to kind of dive into some of the information associated with the studies that we've done. The environment hasn't changed per se, maybe a little bit during COVID, right? So law enforcement really challenged in performing what was considered to be their normal work. So I think our populations went down. And then as we come out of COVID and get back to somewhat normalcy, I'm wondering how much the changes in the laws impacting law enforcement is going to impact jail population. So a little hesitant to jump in and go off of historical numbers to justify why we'd need to build a new facility. But definitely am dealing with much, I'm sure many other counties are dealing with, aging infrastructure associated with the jail and balancing the safety of our correctional staff with the amount of people that we have in there, as well as potential threats, from the ACLU, just making sure that we're providing adequate resources and care to our inmates.
Yeah, as part of that process, we started off evaluating a regional facility, a joint facility with Grays Harbor County, and maybe being able to bring, two counties' resources to bear on a project like that. And one of the challenges there is, each county has its own approach to alternatives and different options for diversion programs and things like that. And, you know, and it's difficult to kind of, you know, map that out when, you know, you have two counties that have different approaches in that regard. And so, you know, even when you're starting to look at finding some efficiencies by joining together with other jurisdictions, you know, there are some challenges there. And so, you know, you're left figuring out, okay, how do we do that versus, you know, how do we make it pencil, you know, to do a project on our own, which is a big lift, regardless of the size of the project. I mean, it's you're building a, you know, multi-million-dollar facility that has to last, you know, for a long time in order to, you know, meet the needs of the community today and into the future. So it's a big challenge, for sure.
Do you have a proposed funding source?
I don't think we're that far down yet. I mean, I think, you know, we were working with a firm on a needs assessment and haven't yet completed that. So I think we're still a ways off.
Right. Well, I think Commissioner Trask was on the virtual assembly, a number of counties had some suggestions of how they were successful in community-wide strategies of funding and operations, but the cost of development it just continually goes up compared to, you know, just a number of years, 2, 3, 4 years ago when like Skagit County built a new jail. You know, it's dramatically different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and now Waukem's looking at one. They were unsuccessful when Jack Louch was the executive. They think they went out twice trying to find a jail solution, and they're back trying to figure out a jail solution because they've got a really aging jail and need that echo from the, you know, Mark, you mentioned the concern about, you know, officer safety, inmate safety, ECLU, all those types of things that, you know, they're trying to get ahead of, but they can't find a solution that the voters that want to pay for as well.
For sure.
So it's hiring people that they are willing to come in and work in correctional facilities that actually, you know, holding them accountable to do their job too, right? So we want to create an environment, pretty strong unions within that group. So how do you take some of those traditional benefits that went to the individuals that have been there for a long time and maybe have the ability to pick their schedules, and then that leaves the leftovers to all the new people, and new people coming in are thinking, gosh, do I really want to do that? I mean, that's something that I've recently heard from our correction staff, is something that they're concerned about is, you know, when we talk about how do we create an environment where people want to work, because it may be worth it to an individual that lives here in Mason County to work in Mason County and not have to travel to a Thurston or a Pierce or Kitsap, and absolutely would love to do that, but it's a challenge sometimes.
Well, thank you. I mean, we can sit and chat. We've got the time, but we want to honor your time. So,
Well, excellent. Hey, commissioners, any last thoughts for Councilmember Stevens or Eric before we sign off?
Just a thank you, Eric. My apologies for not being as much available in the beginning. I actually was getting a medical thing done the whole time. I was still on the meeting listening, just couldn't participate. So my apologies.
great. Well, thanks for joining us and hearing us.
And thanks to all of you for making the time for the meeting and sticking with us. And again, thank you for your involvement in WSAC, because that's what makes us a good, viable organization, is the members who are participating.
Yeah, and representing us in statewide boards and commissions, really appreciate that. I mean, there's only a small pool of you that are eligible in many of these statutory responsibilities. So really thank you for leaning into those. And Mark, we hope you'll really join the administrators group too. There's only a small pool of county administrators, and so we really try and tap those as often as possible. So we hope we can abuse you in that role.
Actually, I've already Kathy Mulhole started forwarding them to me and saying, hey, you need to start coming to these. So I have attended the ones that I could fit into my schedule, and they've been super beneficial. So absolutely, we'll continue to be involved.
Great, yeah, thank you.
All right, well, thanks so much. Great information today. And as always, just appreciate being able to work with you. So thanks also to Commissioner Trask for your service on LSC. I know those sessions are long and tedious, so. Very good. Great.
And frustrating, I might add.
For sure.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Appreciate it.
See you guys.
All right, have a good afternoon.